What's going on, guys? This is quiz number 15. We're going to analyze 3 positions and talk about what the best moves are and why. Now, real quick, before we get into the positions, I have one announcement. So you guys know I have my upcoming tournament coming over Thanksgiving. I actually just created this poll over on the Patreon page where you can guess how many points you think I'm going to score in the tournament. I'm going to be taking one bye, and so I have a minimum of half of a point that I will get, and then maximum of 8.5 out of 9. So you can vote over there. Anybody who gets it right, I'm going to do free analysis of your games. So check that out if you haven't already. But having said that, let's get into the positions. All right, here's position number 1. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that. I'll just give you a few seconds. And if you're ready to see the solution, here we go. All right, so for 0 to 1,000 and 1,000 to 1,600, we had the same 3 moves. B5, queen to A4, and queen to F3 were the top moves. And then above 1,600, we had B5, B takes C5, and queen to A4. All right, so first of all, there was no immediate tactic where you're going to win a piece or get checkmate or anything like that in this position. It's kind of just a normal position that, you might find in one of your games. I want to throw these in every now and then just so that it's not always just about the tactics, because you do have to be able to think through positions like this. Now, that being said, there are some subtle things that you really wanted to pick up on, and we'll talk about those now. So the first thing that I want to point out, and we'll start with the move like queen a4. Actually, queen a4 and queen f3 were very similar in this regard, but let's just start with queen a4. We're putting pressure on the knight, and the knight doesn't want to go back. If the knight retreats back here, this is really bad for black, and now white's going to have a really nice advantage because of all the space we have. We forced them back. We're kind of able to infiltrate on this file, and even capturing here, the rook can come in. It's really good news. But what black can do is capture here, and then we pretty much have to take. If we don't take, this knight is just going to be attacking everything really, really strong. So we take, black takes, and let's just say we recapture. This looks kind of good because, all right, we're lined up. Looks like we're probably going to be able to win this pawn. But the issue with this, and this is a key thing that you really want to think through in your games, the issue with this position is that we have a bishop on a light square, and black has a bishop on a dark square. So this is considered an opposite colored bishop ending. Now, it's not opposite color because we have a white bishop, they have a black bishop. It has to do with the color of the squares, right? So on a white square, on a black square, okay? Sorry, black square. Why is that important? Well, it's important because these positions usually are very, very drawish. And what probably is going to happen in a position like this is black will simply, let's say, capture here. We'll capture here to, to save our pawn, and black will go check, we'll move, and, black could do something like this, let's say. And this bishop is defended very nicely by these pawns. Our bishop is defended by these pawns. It's 5 against 5. If the queens and rooks get traded off, this is going to be a draw every time. There's just no way we can make progress, because if we ever try to move our pawn forward, it's going to get captured. Same thing with black, it's going to get captured. Nobody can do anything, okay? So this is kind of what you had to think about when you considered a move like queen a4 or queen f3. Queen f3, let's go back, is going to lead to very similar type of positions. Queen f3, black can just simply take here, and then yes, you can take, and you might be able to win this pawn, but even if you can, probably not, because after take, the bishop can come in. But let's say you took this way, okay? But even if you win that, it's still opposite color bishops. Black can actually come over here, start putting pressure on here, and black actually has a pretty nice position. But again, you've got these opposite color bishops, and it's just even 5 against 5 pawns. So probably going to be pretty drawish. Now, if we go back and we compare the move b5. Now, first of all, black can do the same thing, and this is actually the best move. Again, if they go back, really, really bad news for black. Now you're going to be in a nice position. You can bring this rook over here to infiltrate the a file. You can also potentially do something here after some of these pawns get traded, but it's really good for white. So again, black probably would have to play knight b4, takes, takes, and takes. And now, let's say takes, takes. At least here you have an extra pawn, right? 3 against 2. Now, again, it's still probably going to be drawish because these bishops, but this is like a better version of the same position as, when you went queen a4 and queen f3. Okay, so that's why b5 was actually a little bit better. That being said, a lot of these moves were pretty similar, and they weren't bad by any means, queen a4 or queen f3. but this way you kind of get an extra pawn out of the deal. All right, so the last thing I want to point out here is because we've talked about the opposite color bishops, right? Like if this gets traded for this, you have the opposite color bishop ending. If you were playing a game and you absolutely 100% did not want to draw, you either wanted to win or you wanted to lose. Maybe you're in a must-win situation in a tournament. What you could consider, and this is pretty drastic, but I just want to make you aware of it. You could consider trading this bishop simply to avoid the opposite color bishop ending that's going to happen after the knight takes. And you can play b5 and, you know, try to get this rook coming in before black can get control of the a file. And now you have the same color bishops, not nearly as drawish as with the opposite color bishop. Now, of course, it could still be a draw. If you trade everything off and everybody plays well, it might still be a draw, but the chances are not as good. Now, the other thing that I want to point out, let's just say that you did play the, you know, b5 and black did do this, takes. Just say, I don't know, takes and takes. You get this position and you have the opposite color bishops. It's very drawish in the endgame, like we've already talked about. But the other thing about opposite color bishops is you can attack the king pretty nicely. So if you don't trade off all the queens and the rooks and you go for an attack on the king, that's probably your best chance at winning the game. Okay. At the same time, you have to be careful because if black is able to launch an attack on your king, it's going to be very strong. It has to do with the fact that black can use the bishop and queen and maybe even a rook along the dark squares, and your bishop cannot do anything about it. But at the same time, you can, you know, do something with your queen and bishop along the white squares, and black's bishop can't do anything about it. So it's kind of like you get an extra piece that you can use to attack your opponent, but they also get the same thing. So the opposite color bishop is very tricky. But those are the things that you want to think about when you get into these kind of endgames. And real quick, if we check Stockfish, you can see b5 is the best move. Queen a4 kind of leads to just equal position. Actually, b takes c5 is listed. And I think the reason behind this is that after you trade the pawn, you can actually play queen a4 now. And again, you know, the knight really doesn't want to retreat. And so like after knight b4, well, now you can again take and win another pawn. And this is kind of a different way to win a pawn. And you get a little bit different position where you have two files open. So this could be something, you know, that you maybe could have considered if you like this. All right, this is position number 2. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that now. Just to give you a few seconds. And if you're ready to see the solutions, here we go. All right, 0 to 1,000. Top move, queen f3. Then we had c3 and then h3. 1,000 to 1,600, we had queen f3, h3, and then queen e2. And then also same 3 moves above 1,600. All right, so this position was actually meant to be one of the easier ones. There was one little trick that I wanted to see if you saw, and most of you, I think, did see it. Now, I say I think because queen f3, some people may have suggested because they were going for the attack on f7, but queen f3 actually serves a better purpose, and the purpose of queen f3 is that it prevents you from getting checkmated. So if you don't play queen f3, and the move that was actually played in the game, which some of you guys suggested, was c3, and c3 looks like a decent move, right? Attacking the queen. The problem is queen comes down here, defended by the bishop, so you can't take with the king. You have to take with the rook, and we get the famous smothered checkmate. This was kind of a clever way to go about doing it, but same idea, right? So that was the idea. That's what you had to, you know, notice. And so queen f3. Now, if the queen goes there, you can just take it. And if the knight comes in, it's not checkmate. You can just simply take and the game goes on. So that was the idea there. And also queen e2 kind of had the same effect, right? Again, you can still take the knight because the queen covers that square, okay? h3 also gets the job done because now when the queen comes in, you can take, and this is no longer checkmate. You can move. Now, they're still going to get the queen, but, you know, again, the game moves on. So h3 was fine as well. But that's really just what I wanted, you know, to see if you saw. And of course, Stockfish likes queen f3 a little bit better than h3, but, you know, both of those are fine. And then c3 just hangs mate in 2. All right, here's position number 3. If you want to pause the video and figure out what you would play for black, go ahead and do that now. I'll give you a few seconds. All right, if you're ready to see the solution, here we go. All right, 0 to 1,000. Top move was knight to h5. Then we had knight takes e4, and then castle kingside. 1,000 to 1,600. Top move was knight takes e4, then queen d7, and then knight h5. And above 1,600, we had knight takes e4, knight h5, and h6. All right, so this position, it seems like most people were understanding what the idea was, but there's this discovered attack on the bishop here. This is very common in all types of different openings where the bishop comes out to pin the knight, you block with the bishop, and then you sort of get this attack there. And so at some point during the game, you always want to be on the lookout for, can you move your knight and do something useful and at the same time attack the bishop, right? And in this case, you can. And so the question that it seems that we have to answer is, which way is better? Is it better to go knight h5 or is it better to go knight to e4? Well, they kind of do the same thing, except this way you're taking a pawn. So this way is better, right? Because at the end of the day, white's probably going to take you with a counterattack on your queen, and you're going to take their queen and move on. And so the knight's going to leave regardless, right? And at the end of the day, you got the pawn. Okay, so that's why knight takes e4 was better. And it's really interesting because if you put this in Stockfish, I'm going to turn it on for a second. At this point, it says white has to take. You take the bishop. You don't really want to take the rook because then your knight gets stuck, and then this bishop gets away, and it turns out to be not as good of a trade. And so let's just say king takes here, and then you can take this with the rook. And it loves black's position, even though when you look at it, two rooks, two pieces, two rooks, two pieces, it's relatively equal. You did get the extra pawn, but on top of the pawn, you've got a big lead in development, right? You have three pieces that are kind of ready to be involved in the game, and whites are still back there. So -4 is what the engine says. Okay, even though you only want a pawn, it says -4. If we go back and we look at the same line, except instead of taking on e4, we go to h5. And then, okay, let's do the same thing. Takes, 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 king takes, and takes, right? Same exact position. We still have the lead in development, but we didn't get the pawn on e4. And now Stockfish says it's just about equal, -0.5. It's saying you're up half a pawn. I found this fascinating when I was looking at it because, it doesn't seem like this one pawn should be worth 4. And the only thing that I could come up with is that even though we have this lead in development, because there's the extra pawn there, there's not really a way to take advantage of it right away. Like we could try to play, well, it's white's turn, but like, let's say here, we could try to play like f5, maybe to attack them, but it looks like white is in time to defend, and I'm just letting it analyze a little bit. Yeah, even just c4 kind of blocking up the position, and we're not really going to be able to get through, right? If we go all the way back and we kind of contrast that with, we compare that to back here where the pawn is gone, and let's say white tries to do the same thing. So here we play f5, they try to kind of block up the position. Well, now, because that pawn is gone, we can play, yeah, e4 is a good move. And if they try to take it, we take. And if they take, boom, bishop takes c4. And now white's actually in trouble. So for example, king d2, we play bishop d5. And look at all of the threats that we have because that one pawn is gone. Like white can try to play f3, we're just going to castle. And you can see how open the position is. White wasn't able to close it off. And so, it just goes to show, you go all the way back to the beginning position here. When your king's in the center, losing a central pawn is a really big deal, right? And the fact that black has a lead in development, right? Black has all 4 pieces out and white only has 2 out, right? So you can see that as well. But, getting that pawn instead of just going to knight h5 was a huge, huge difference, okay? And just to recap, I think some people might be confused about this. Taking the rook, the problem is that now this bishop is going to leave somewhere. So let's say bishop g5, and your knight is still trapped. And so eventually, probably, like let's just say we castle, knight f3, let's say we play f6, bishop goes back somewhere, we bring a rook over. Eventually, yeah, the king's going to come over, and we're going to lose that knight. And you're going to end up in a position where you have white has 2 pieces for the rook that we got, which is not as good. It's just not a very good trade for us, as opposed to just getting the free pawn, right, and having an even trade there. So that's why here it's actually just better to take the bishop. And the bishop can't leave here. We just trade like this and we get this position. So everything's kind of equal, and we have the extra pawn. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of clarify why you didn't want to take the rook there, because it turns out to be a rook for 2 pieces, which is not a good trade. Go back and check Stockfish. You see knight takes e4. Queen d7 actually was a good move. I think a couple people suggested that. Just kind of keeping with the lead in development, getting ready to castle this way, probably open up the d file. You know, not as good as going for that tactic and winning the pawn, but if you had to choose something, that was pretty good as well. And then somebody had said h6. Let's see how h6 performs. Yeah, h6 is okay as well. Forcing the bishop to do something. Takes. Now you have the bishop pair. That wasn't bad. And then I think somebody else had said castling. Castling is not the greatest move. You have to be careful, first of all. The queen is here. White's knight's going to come out. And now you miss the opportunity to do that tactic, because now that the knight defends the bishop, it doesn't work anymore because they just take your knight. And I guess I should have pointed that out earlier. But going back to the original position, if they just take your knight, then you have the battery here to take this, right? So that's why they don't really want to do that. And then you have to go for this line. But okay. Yeah, so I think we covered everything. So yeah, those are the 3 positions. Hopefully you guys learned something from those. And don't forget to check out Patreon. There's a link in the description below. But as always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.